sensitive to the needs of our residents and how we want our suburbs to look. Council has rules that allow for apartment buildings to be located in our activity centres. But in our residential areas, we will ensure new housing respects the established height, heritage and character of our suburbs. We have expanded our team of officers to ensure new development delivers on important features like landscaping, privacy and environmental benefits. Moreland is changing and needs a diverse range of housing. Because we're a diverse community, some of us rent, some of us own. We have single people living in houses and families living in apartments. Into the future, we know we will need more smaller homes to cater for increasing numbers of small households. We need to cater for a range of people living in a range of different housing options. It's more than just housing we're planning for, it's the infrastructure that supports it. 5,000 new street trees every year, sustainable environmental practices, green open space and better shopping strips. We're also working to make it easier for you to find out information and let us know your views on new development. Moreland is our home, one community, proudly diverse. By 2036, it's estimated there'll be 43,000 more people living here in Moreland. And they're all going to need to move about. To walk, cycle, drive, bus, tram, train, use shared vehicles, and whatever technology emerges next. Smart, effective transport is vital. So Moreland Council has plans to help keep us moving now and into the future. Our road network is already congested and more cars will only make that worse. We need to limit the number of additional cars travelling and parking around our city if we want to keep our quality of life or make it better. Building wider or more roads isn't the answer. There just isn't land available without immense cost. The answer is in making other forms of transport more attractive, practical, accessible and available. We're lucky. Parts of Moreland are rich with transport options. In these areas, there are more opportunities to change the way we move around. And we're working to create even more transport options for everyone throughout Moreland. We're going to give more space to pedestrians and cyclists and work with the state government to improve public transport. We want residents who move into new housing that's close to public transport and shopping areas to bring fewer cars with them. We're encouraging this by allowing fewer spaces within these new buildings and continuing to limit access to on-street parking permits for these new residences.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. My name is Councillor Natalie Aboud and I'm the Mayor of the Council and the Chairperson for tonight's meeting for planning and related matters. It is my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. Our meeting is being held on the traditional country of the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people and I acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging and the elders from other communities who may be here with us today. I acknowledge that currently many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people call Moreland home. I also acknowledge that the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people never ceded sovereignty of their lands and have continuously cared for their country for over 60,000 years as the world's oldest living culture. Members of the gallery, please note that this planning and related matters meeting will be recorded and web streamed live to Council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. Councillors, just as a reminder that in line with the adopted councillor conduct principles as outlined in the Councillor Code of Conduct, councillors should ensure that they conduct themselves in the meeting with integrity, impartially exercise their responsibilities in the interest of the local community and not improperly seek to confer or advantage any person. This behaviour will support principles for leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. Members of the gallery, in the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. Please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance tonight. Councillor Sue Bolton. Councillor Anna-Olivia Carley-Hannon. Councillor Helen Davidson.
Good evening.
The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Mark Riley.
Hello.
Councillor Alia Farnley.
Hi.
Councillor John Kavanagh. Councillor Dale Martin. And Councillor Oscar Yildiz. The officers in attendance tonight are, to my left, Philip Priest, the Group Manager of City Development, Vita Galante, the Planning Coordinator, Darren Camilleri, another Planning Coordinator, Megan Merritt, Principal Planner, Sally Curran, the Unit Manager of Governance and Civic Protocols, and Naomi Ellis, the Team Leader of Governance. So I just would like to note that Councillor Dorney is on leave of absence from the meeting this evening, and also I've heard from Councillor Tapanos, who is running late, but he's on the way, so we'll see him soon. So there are no further apologies. I'll now move on to declarations of interest and or conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any interests or conflicts of interest to declare? Okay, if there are no other conflicts, I'll move on to the meeting. Confirmation of the minutes. Could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting for planning and related matters held on the 28th of August 2019 and the special council meeting planning and related matters held on the 11th of September 2019? Councillor Riley, and a seconder, please. I just saw Councillor Kavanagh's hand there. Thanks, Councillor Yildiz. Is there any debate on that motion? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Declare that carried. Welcome, Councillor Tapanos. Didn't miss anything. Excellent. Okay, so I wish to give you an outline of how the planning and related matters meeting will run this evening. The relevant planner will introduce the report and officer's recommendation. I will then give any objectors the opportunity to move to the lectern to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name and address for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please do not repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you are opposed to the planning application, would you please inform the meeting why you are opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns? Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. Please note that there is a limit of 3 minutes for each speaker, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. So I'll now move to the presentation of the reports. And the first report we have this evening is 80, 82 and 82A, Albion Street, Brunswick East, Planning Permit Application MPS 2018-752. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abood. So this is an application, as mentioned, at 80, 82A and 82 Albion Street in Brunswick East that is seeking the construction of a 6-storey building containing a shop and dwellings. The site is located within, or at the edge, I should say, of the Brunswick Activity Centre, which is an area identified for significant housing growth. The site is located at the corner of Albion Street and Eddy Street. So part of the subject site is located within a commercial 1 zone, which is affected by a design and development overlay and has a preferred overall building height of 14 metres. The other part of the site is in a neighbourhood residential zone and is currently used as an at-grade car park. The original proposal that was considered by council was for a 6-storey building containing a ground floor retail tenancy and 24 dwellings above. Council officers were not supportive of this original proposal on the basis that it did not adequately respond to the relevant policies of the planning scheme. And the applicant lodged an appeal at the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal against council's failure to determine the application. As part of the application process, public notice was undertaken and 56 objections were received, with a range of issues raised which included building height, traffic and amenity impacts. to name a few of the issues. And 6 of those objectors subsequently became a party to the VCAT appeal. So the application has gone through a process at VCAT, which has included 2 compulsory conferences and a number of revisions to plans that has occurred on a without prejudice basis. The background of this process is detailed in the officer's report that's contained in tonight's agenda. But in summary, the changes made to the proposal in the latest version of plans include a revised architectural resolution, the deletion of 1 storey, increased setbacks to the uppermost level, modifications to apartment layouts, including the reduction in the number of dwellings from 24 to 21, a reduction in the width of the vehicle access way to Eddy Street, and setbacks in the southwest corner of the basement to limit impacts on a movable tree in a nearby property. The without prejudice proposal makes a number of positive changes to the advertised proposal, including a reduction in height, increased setbacks, additional landscaping and improved internal amenity. The proposal would also not result in any unreasonable amenity impacts and achieves a high level of environmentally sustainable design. However, the architectural resolution of the building is not considered to adequately address the site context within this highly visible gateway location. It's therefore recommended that Council not consent to the proposal in its current form. However, it's recommended that Council authorise officers to continue to negotiate with the applicant and reach a position of consent if further without prejudice plans can be prepared that improve the architectural resolution to Council officers' satisfaction. If a position of consent cannot be reached, Council's position at VCAT will continue to be that the planning permit should not issue, and the advertised proposal is contested on grounds outlined in the recommendation of tonight's report. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are there any objectors who wish to speak? So, as you like, yep. So,
I'll come up first.
okay, thank you, Nick.
Nick Dolby, Holbrook Crescent, West Brunswick, formerly resident of Leithhead Street in just up the road from this place. Every day my children walk past this site to go to Brunswick East Primary School. Every day they walk down Eddy Street next to this site. The applicant has put forward drawings saying that it's not Eddy Street. Oh, look, it's not for cars, it's not for public transport. But in terms of pedestrian access, it is in fact a major pedestrian route, not only for the rear of shops, the former supermarket and so on Lygon Street, but also importantly for Brunswick East Primary School. So when considering these plans, I'd like you to think about that Eddy Street isn't just a barren back of shops, that it is actually a living street, an active street. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
My name's Margaret Rowell. I live at 78 Glenmorgan Street, directly behind number 80 Albion Street. I'd like to first of all continue on about Eddy Street. Not only are there pedestrians, and I turn right into Eddy Street every morning and I walk along Eddy Street every day several times. It is a major bike path. It is designated as a bike path. And children go to East Brunswick Primary School on that bike path on bikes every day. I've been to the police already about people who use Eddy Street going the wrong way. Eddy Street is a one-way street. Its only access from Lygon Street is through Bladen Street. And if you try to get into Bladen Street, you block up the traffic and the trams. It is a very dangerous street already for children on bikes, and it will continue to be dangerous for children on bikes with the increased traffic that's there. So thank you for your comment on Eddy Street.
Thank you, Margaret.
I will go on.
Sure.
I've looked at the Moreland strategy. The gateway in the Moreland strategy is not actually located at 82. It is located on the corner of Lygon Street and Nicholson Street and Eddy Street, not Albion Street. It is on where Lot of Love is. This building is huge. It will overshadow. My garden will be in shadow most of the time. At the compulsory conferences, we had details from the developers about problems that would not affect my solar access. The reports from my solar company, which is a Brunswick company, differ. It is very large. We had 2 weeks' notice just before Christmas last year, and the majority of residents who put in complaints were all concerned about the height and size and bulk of this building, neighbouring a small residential area backing on to Glenmorgan Street, which has heritage overlay, with large trees, some of which are now in dire health. The building will overlook neighbouring houses. My neighbours here, who live directly behind it at number 80 Glenmorgan Street, will have further to say. But it is too large for this corner. The access into Eddy Street is a problem, and it will overshadow, not to say about the aesthetics.
Thank you, Margaret. It's up to you. Thank you.
My name's Lyle Stebbing. I'm at Home Street, number 12. As has been made clear, residents believe that the originally proposed 6-storey building, then the offer of 5-storey building that the officer's report seems to accept, are appropriate. We don't, and we have several objections, but the main objection is the visual bulk of the building. We think it's too great for that corner. You can see from that a building that's over 4 storeys will dominate that corner. That corner, for those who know it, is already grim and forbidding and unwelcoming, with cars turning around the corner quickly. It's dangerous for pedestrians, and a building like that will make it more unfriendly, more unwelcoming for residents. Despite the setbacks, the 5th level will be clearly visible from Home Street and Albion Streets, and on top of that 5th level is also going to be a roof garden. The officer's report itself says on page 11, urban design advised that 4 storeys in line with the DDO would still be considered the preferred approach for this site. Furthermore, the overall architectural resolution was not supported as detailed in section 4 of this report, unquote. Yet later, the same report contradicts this and inexplicably concludes on page 12, the heightened setbacks of the without prejudice plans therefore strike an acceptable balance between the competing policy objectives for density. No reason is given for this, therefore. And on page 16, a successful architectural resolution is critical. This is the key remaining issue for this proposal. That's misleading because it's not the key remaining issue for the community. And it goes on to say, as detailed in section 4 of this report, the heightened setbacks of the proposal are considered to respond to key policy objectives. Considered by whom, one must wonder. Not by the urban design unit and not by the community. And we have other concerns. The more units, the more residents with cars and more cars exiting. I'm not concerned about, people have talked about Eddy Street, but I'm concerned about that corner, which I cross daily or run across the corner daily because it's scary. There'll be more cars exiting onto an already dangerous corner. Thirdly, there's no step down or gradation onto the neighbourhood residential zone, which is adjacent to it. And Other people have pointed out that overdevelopment in Eddy Street, and there's a lot of other development going on apart from this building, will increase the dangers for cyclists and school children. So we insist that the landmark Lyndhurst Hotel should set the standard for height in this area. It will dominate residents' views of the Lyndhurst Hotel. That's a heritage hotel. It's iconic. That should be the gateway to Brunswick Village. Another worrying matter about most of the new apartments in Brunswick, and the more apartments, more floors are added, the worse this will be exacerbated. It creates, most of the apartments are rented out for temporary tenants, creating a greater number of shifting transitory tenants who have little sense of community or interest in the neighbourhood. And that's why we feel we want 4 stories and no more. Finally, we are asking the council to judge this case on its merits and set a 4-storey limit. Do not assume we're asking you as what will happen in VCAT. Several people have predicted a negative outcome in VCAT when objections are made, but in fact, objectors have in fact achieved a positive outcome on many occasions. So we're asking council to set a height limit of 4 stories.
Thank you, Lyle. You're very polite. All of you are so polite. No one's racing to get up there, just letting each other have the space. But come forward, do your thing. Yep. Thank you.
My name is Peter O'Donnell, and I live at 11 Dunstan Avenue. And I oppose giving the council officers more time to negotiate, and I reject any suggestion of more than 4 buildings on the site. And I'll begin by referring to the DDO preference and objectives for this site. Firstly, the DDO has a preferred height limit of 14 metres on this site, and this decision is supported by the Urban Design Unit as well. Secondly, the DDO recognises the need for a transition between the height of the activity centre and the height of the adjoining low-rise residential area. This is especially a reference to Glenmorgan Street and neighbouring streets, which are the source of many objectors, many of the 56 objectors to the development and including parties to VCAT. Thirdly, the proposal fails to respect the Lyndhurst Hotel by way of height and form. Thus, the proposal fails on the preferred height, the respect for the neighbourhood residential zone, and respect for the heritage Lyndhurst Hotel. They would seem to be very strong failures. But despite this, the executive summary states that a height of 2.2 metres above the preferred height is acceptable, and asks for the right to continue negotiating with the developer on plans, notwithstanding the following circumstances: 2 VCAT compulsory conference days of negotiation. Failed. Many council meetings between council officers and the developer. Failed so far. Failed, I would say. I might add that there has been no consultation involving the community and its 56 objectors. That's just a contrast. 7 sets of plans, the last dated August the 13th and referred to on page 4 of the executive summary, presented by the developer. Nothing more than a diagram to allay fears about what a 5-storey building over residents' back fence might mean for their amenity. Recognition that it's not possible to disguise the height of the building, especially given the long straight approaches to it along Albion Line, Lygon and especially Home Street. We need harmony on this corner. Harmony. You can see harmony in parts of Brunswick where there have been new developments, and you can see disharmony. And I'll just give you two examples, and they both involve hotels. If you go to the corner of Nicholson Street and Blythe Street, you'll see a building diagonally opposite the Lomond Hotel, which fits the proportions of the hotel very well. But then if you go down Lygon Street and come to the East Brunswick Hotel, you'll see a heritage hotel which has been diminished utterly by the height of the buildings that surround it. So we're just asking for good taste, really, with many good reasons to back it up. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone else?
Tim Glanville, 11 Dunstan Avenue, Brunswick. We've often been told that where the activity centre abuts the neighbourhood residential zone, as in this case, the current response is a step down. But in this case, the officer's report is recommending a step up from 4 stories in Lygon Street to 5 stories for this building, and then down to single-storey houses. A step up. Now, our neighbourhood our neighbourhood group has been in VCAT many times about this section of Lygon Street. We're interested in the section between Albion Street and Bladen Avenue, which, as you would know, has considerable potential as a commercial strip. It has chemist, newsagent, supermarket. We've often been to VCAT during the past 6 years. The council's position in VCAT during the past 6 years has always been for 4 stories. Has always been for 4 stories in this section, and this is confirmed by the Urban Design Unit comments in the officer's report. In May 2017, there was a case before Senior Member Rickards. At the compulsory conference, Kate McLaren for the council argued very strongly for 4 stories. She actually phoned the town hall, phoned her superiors in the town hall, who confirmed that 4 stories was appropriate. At the hearing, Ms. Plakiadis again argued for 4 stories. That's one example where we were attended. In January 2015, there was another case before Member Fong. David Di Giovanni represented the council, and again he argued at length for 4 stories in this section of Lygon Street. In October 2014, there was a hearing before Madam Member Benz at 522 Lygon Street. Mr Di Giovanni again represented the council, and again the decision was for 4 stories for this building. There's an earlier case at 518 Lygon Street, and again the decision was for 4 stories. Council has never supported more than 4 stories in this section of Lygon Street. I might mention that the last 2 cases are directly behind the site for this building. Council has never supported anything beyond 4 stories in this section of Lygon Street, and yet this site is 2 blocks back, is across a road, Eddy Street, and is surrounded by the neighbourhood residential zone. Other people have covered the Lyndhurst Hotel. I won't go into it in any detail. It's a major heritage building in East Brunswick and needs to be respected. Anything above 4 stories does not respect the Lyndhurst Hotel. Now, some may argue that it's pointless for this meeting to lower the height of the building, as VCAT will only overturn council's decision. I might stress we've had a lot of experience, and this is not our experience. On a number of cases, we've been told categorically what VCAT would decide, only to find that in the event VCAT decided the opposite. And one of these cases was quite recent. So it's just not true that VCAT is going to overturn your decision. Council should make decisions on the merits of this proposal and not on guesswork about what VCAT might do. Council's current policy for this section of Lygon Street, that is the eastern side, which is the commercial side, between Albion Street and Bladen Avenue, Council's policy has been for 4 stories. In no case has Council approved or even argued for anything above 4 stories. But as I say, right, I'll finish. This is 2 blocks back. It's across a road. It's next to the neighbourhood residential zone. Council should confirm its policy tonight of 4 stories in this area.
Thank you, Tim. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Yes? 2 more? Yes? Sure.
You'll have to forgive my English, okay? But I live in Home Street for the past 39 years, okay? Gradually, the council, I don't mean today or the other one, they make Nicholson Street and Lygon Street traffic converge in the crossing that is right there in the picture. So it creates a very big amount of traffic. This traffic stop from Nicholson Street goes to Mulling Road, they make it there. Now, you're constructing so many buildings, we can hardly breathe. Before you used to breathe air from the sea, now you can't even see the sea. That building there is too huge. Now, from now on, okay, I live in East Brunswick, okay? But from the corner of Brunswick, that's the liaison of the two between the shops district and our place. Supposed to be level. We live in suburb. We don't live in the city. We would like to maintain our Brunswick heritage. It's not mine by birth, but it's by living in there. Okay? So that's what we ask the council to consider these things. They've been using all the factory, and I was working in one of those factories, to make huge, ugly building. And you give permission to construct this ugly building. Wherever there was before a house or little street or things like that, there was a tree, a little garden. Everything has disappeared. It's become all cement. And what did they do? They only increase population. Okay? Well, it's time to stop a little bit. We got sick and tired of this kind of things. We want a bit of harmony in our street. Before they say they close this street, they close the other street because there's children. There's children in Home Street, in Lygon Street, and everywhere. The traffic is completely horrendous. The street cannot support this traffic no more. If you have to cross that crossing there, you have to look left, right, side, deep, because it's becoming too crowded. We want harmony in our street. We want noise building. Once Brunswick was the best suburb in all Melbourne. Now it's become a dumb street for ugly building that council give permission to build. Now, whoever is developer doesn't live here. They live in Noise Street. They don't live in our poor working suburb. We want our suburb to become our home. That's all I can say.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't say my name.
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Elsa.
Elsa,
Lanconelli.
Thank you so
And
much.
I live in Home Street.
Thank you very
8 Home Street. Thank you for my sorry.
You did a great job.
Pretty good speech.
Yep.
My name's Penny Gumman. I live in Glenmorgan Street. Apart from everything else that everybody else has said, which I totally agree with, I'm very concerned about precedent, that if this building is allowed, there might be a domino effect down the street, with the result that all the houses in Glenmorgan Street will be overshadowed. If it's acceptable for a few houses to be overshadowed by this one, then what about all the other houses in Glenmorgan Street? We could end up just the skyline would be just all like this. So precedent, that's just my extra bit.
Thank you, Penny. Anyone else like to have a few words? I'm just going to go slowly in case somebody stands up at the last minute. So I'll now ask the applicant or representative of the applicant to speak, if you would like to.
Good evening, councillors. My name's Jamie Govenlock. And I'm a town planner from Urbis, and my work address is level 12, 120 Collins Street, and I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to say a few words. First of all, good evening, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. We wholeheartedly support the officers' recommendations. We'd like to thank the officers for the hard work that they've put in through the process. It's been a long process. We've had 2 compulsory conferences. There's been a VCAT declaration hearing about the covenant on part of the site. We felt at the last compulsory conference that we were almost over the line in terms of the issues to be addressed. The tone of that compulsory conference was that a range of issues had been taken off the table and sort of satisfied, and we were getting down to the nitty-gritty. Some of those issues have been put back on the table tonight, and that's fine. That's planning, and that's what we're here to talk about. We've always negotiated in good faith with the objectors and with the councillors and the council officers. We've been very open-minded and flexible. We've sort of changed when we've had to. We've reduced building height. We've reduced apartment numbers and so forth. So we've been very open-ended in relation to that. We're happy to continue that. We've met with the council officers last week in relation to this final matter. I'll just call it the architectural design of the building. We are currently preparing amended plans. We'd like to submit those amended plans very early next week and continue the dialogue with council. We'd also like to continue speaking with the objectors. If we end up at a full VCAT hearing in terms of the merits, so be it, but we're looking to take as many issues off the table as we possibly can and to agree to a consent position with the council. A few of the things from a planning point of view that I've heard tonight, I'll just make a few comments on. In terms of the precedent down Albion Street, that wouldn't be possible here. You've got a neighbourhood residential zone which limits basically building height along Albion Street. The northern part of the eastern part of the site's covered by a restrictive covenant. It's a funny site. You've got a very busy road on one side, you've got a one-way street on one side, you've got a residential interface, and you've effectively got a vacant site which sits as part of the subject site because it can't be developed. There's a covenant on it in terms of it can only be used as a single dwelling. So there's already a buffer that occurs there. The DDO talks extensively about residential interface and setbacks and so forth. This proposal effectively achieves that. There's some minor encroachments into that. They could be classified to be architectural features. In terms of privacy and shadow, those issues have been addressed significantly at the VCAT hearings. It complies with the relevant standards in the planning scheme. In terms of traffic, there will be some additional traffic. It is already a busy area. I certainly accept that. Council's policy settings are to encourage more people to live in these sorts of areas close to public transport and so forth, and jobs and amenity. Council's traffic engineers or engineering department have considered the traffic volumes to be generated by this are well within the volumes that the roads can accommodate. So I'm not a traffic engineer, but all of that information is in the council agenda item. So thank you very much for your time, and we'd like you to support the officer's recommendations. We do have the architect here tonight if there's some questions of detail that people would like to ask.
There probably will be some questions.
Sure.
So you've finished your...
That's it, I'm done.
Just to clarify, Tim, everybody went to about 4 minutes. I was aware of the time, but I felt it was fair to let Jamie go to 3.5 because everybody else spoke a little bit as well. Before you vacate that podium,
sure. Yes.
Jamie,
yes.
You mentioned precedent with regard to Albion Street. I'm interested to know if you have thoughts about precedent along Lygon Street, because I think that's the concern, especially on the eastern side.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's part of the Brunswick structure plan, Brunswick Road structure plan. There's a DDO in place there. There's a number of, existing or approved buildings that sort of range in height from sort of 4 to 7 stories and so forth. There's a couple that are higher as well. The policy setting, rightly or wrongly, I think rightly, because it follows the tram route, is for high density living along there. So buildings, 4, 5, 6, 7 stories along there. So it will change. It's changing now.
Thank you. Is there... Yeah, Councillor Kavanagh and then Councillor Tabernos.
Yes, thanks for the opportunity. You mentioned that you want to work with the residents, etc. It seems as though one of the main sticking points is the height.
Yes.
Would you be willing to go to 4 stories voluntarily?
We started at 6 and I think it's fair to say that we did a lot of soul searching in terms of the compulsory conference process. We don't consider that a waste of time. So we've already taken a level off. We're talking about 2.2 metres above the preferred height limit, and we do have 2 and 3 metre setbacks at that upper level. So we'd be wanting to keep the 5 levels.
Councillor Tapanos?
My question's along the same lines. You mentioned that there was many things that were taken off the table, and this has been a long process of negotiation.
Yes, it has.
I was wondering, and there's more to come, it seems, from the architectural designs that are there.
Correct.
I was wondering when your client's going to formally substitute the plans at VCAT.
We would, well, first of all, we have to see what happens tonight. So if the officer's recommendation goes through as is, we'll be basically working with the planning officers up basically next week, and we'll be looking to substitute those plans soon after that. So we are looking to get a position of agreement with the councillors. We understand there's many issues in relation to the objectives that we may not be able to get there on, but we're wanting to do that. Look, to be honest with you, we actually thought we were there, in terms of the second VCAT hearing, but things change and we accept that.
Just a follow-up, if things have been taken off the table, don't you think it's fair that you substitute those plans now, as opposed to waiting for a determination by council?
We can't substitute the plans right now because it's before well before the hearing date of the 25th of November, and we need to see what the council resolution is going to be as part of that process, effectively. And look, we've operated in good faith, and you know, I've been here and I've spoken to you before, and we've always negotiated in good faith. I consider myself to be a bit of a straight shooter and tell people how it is in terms of, you know, my clients. We said take a level off, and that's been done, and I can tell you that level won't go back on again, and I'm happy to say that.
Councillor Martin?
So sorry, I'm just trying to clarify that point. So if we issue a refusal tonight, you won't formally substitute the plans, and so it'll revert back to the 6 stories.
We will substitute plans. We'll basically run with the plans that are very similar to the ones that you're being asked to consider tonight. We won't be running with 6 levels. Okay? And that's, I'm standing here saying that in public, so we're not going to be running with 6 levels. The lawyers will kill me, but Phil knows how I operate. My word's not word.
Thank you, Jamie. Any other questions from councillors?
Can I ask a question of the architect?
Of course.
Question of the architect. Have you been involved right from the beginning?
Yes, I have.
Can I refer you to page 24 of tonight's agenda, which has an image of the original proposal, the forced substitution?
Sure.
Can I ask?
Just hang on a sec, Don, and
Yep,
we'll
sorry.
just give him a chance to find the page.
Yep.
Yes.
It's the one with the original drawing,
Yes.
and then page 48, which we're currently at, although hasn't been formally substituted, but I get the idea. Can you tell me, I suppose, why it's taken compulsory conferences, etc., to get to something that, well, I'll tell you, I'm not an architect, but that looks far more aesthetic to me than the original proposal. Now, I'm not saying but I know that's subjective, but can you see where I'm coming from, that's taken those compulsory conferences to move from that look to this look?
Actually, the change was done prior to the compulsory conference. It wasn't done as a result of the compulsory conference.
Right.
Interestingly enough, these matters of aesthetics are pretty subjective. We have done a very similar building, which is actually under construction in Port Phillip City Council at the moment, and they had a very different view of the. It's very similar to the
original one.
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
I wish them well in Port Phillip.
This matter is always up to interpretation for different people. As Jamie mentioned earlier, our client has been willing to negotiate and try and get support from not only council but also from the residents. And we heard what they had to say. There was a fundamental concern about the design, and that's why we changed it. That was way before the compulsory conference.
Okay, thank you.
Any other councillors like to ask a question? Okay, so feel free to have a seat. And I'll now ask, please, councillors, is it a question?
No, it was going to be a motion.
Yep, go if you like, yep.
Alternative resolution.
Yeah, I'm going to move that one. Or you can move it. You were standing before us.
Sorry, I didn't see anybody standing up because I'm still looking at my notes. Councillor Bolton.
So I'd like to move an alternative resolution, and the main difference with the council officer's resolution is that the proposal be reduced, so it's an amendment to point 2 of the officer recommendation, that council continues to negotiate with the applicant and reach a position of consent if the proposal is reduced to a height of no more than 4 stories. Then the rest of the point goes on.
Yes, so Councillor Kavanagh is seconding and all of the words are up there. That's the only change, Councillor Bolton?
That's the only change.
Thank you. Would you like to speak to the motion, please, Councillor Bolton?
Yes, I would like to speak to it. I'm sure residents would actually prefer the scale of the building to be even lower, given the height of the Lyndhurst Hotel, and what's going on in this corner. But I feel that that's probably not realistic at this point in time. But I think we really do need to fight to keep the 4-storey preferred height limit. I think if this is allowed to be higher than 4 stories, and it will be, if it's allowed to go through as 5 stories, it's 5 stories plus the roof garden, not 5 stories without a roof garden. This will create a precedent, and there will have a whole lot of applications down that section of Lygon Street for much higher heights, 5, 6, maybe even higher heights. And I think we need to try and hold this intersection and this block to the 4-storey height limit to try and make this area or retain some level of compatibility with the Lyndhurst Hotel. I think that's really important at the moment. When you look at that site, I know there's much more development further down Lygon Street, but this particular area doesn't have a massive amount of development at the moment. It doesn't really have any development at the moment. And so I think 4 stories is really the maximum that this building should be built at. And then especially given that it is surrounded by neighbourhood residential zone for a large section of the site. I think precedent is the most important aspect to me, that it is a preferred height limit of 4 stories in that particular area. And so, yes, it might only be 2.2 metres above the preferred height limit, this proposal, but it's 2.2 metres above the height limit plus a rooftop garden. So I think we need to try and hold this precedent, hold the preferred height limit at 4 stories and try to not allow developments to go above the 4 stories, to try and keep this as, what is in that area. I liked what one of the residents said about the Lyndhurst Hotel being regarded as the gateway. I think that is really what we should regard it as, because it is quite an unusual corner. It's not just any old corner of a little street in the centre of it, in the main part of Lygon Street. This is quite a, it's a very prominent location, and so I think that prominent location means that the Lyndhurst Hotel should be regarded as the gateway, and that should be, in other buildings should be approved in relation to the Lyndhurst Hotel, like what happens in other cities around the world, where in Paris you've got a cathedral which governs the height of the buildings in central Paris, and there are other parts of Australia where those sort of proportions are kept in relation to each other. So those are my main arguments as to why I think this building should be no more than 4 stories.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. Councillor Kavanagh?
Yes, thank you. Just briefly, thank you, Councillor Bolton, for that alternative motion. I'm fully supportive of that alternative motion. Not only for the Lyndhurst Hotel, even though I'm very fond of the Lyndhurst. My uncle and aunt owned the Lyndhurst for 25 years as a child in my childhood, and I spent almost every Saturday there. It's also the place where Olivia Newton-John had her first singing engagement as a 15, 16-year-old as well. So got a bit of social heritage as well as physical heritage. But also for the height of the building itself and the impact of the neighbouring neighbourhood residential zone behind the building is also extremely important. I know at these things you don't get everything, but I think if the applicant can see fit to dropping off this, I think he is going to have a group of people that will be at least reasonably supportive of the application and less distressed about the entire application. And I think that's a big win. And I still think when you look at it, the top story that he had was 2 3-bedroom units. So we're still asking for 19 units, and we're still, I think it's certainly a very, very, still getting a lot of yield out of that site. And I think it's probably a fair compromise because it is such a significant site. But I also agree with Councillor Bolton that if you're talking about that corner, Lyndhurst is the site on that corner that is of huge significance. And so, just to point out a couple of other things in the recommendation, I do congratulate our officers for the way in which they've worked this through. It's quite a process, as you saw from the very beginning of the process right through to tonight. I'm hoping that this will be accepted by the applicant, and this is the end of the process, that we go to VCAT. There's a couple more discussions, and then it's over. But I do also want to congratulate the residents for their persistence. As one of the gentlemen mentioned, this area has had a range of development and many visits to VCAT over a period of years, and that's quite draining, I know, for residents, and I congratulate you on your persistency.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanagh. Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion? Okay, so I think there are other speakers who would like to speak in support, and I've seen Councillor Riley's hand and Councillor Tapanos after that.
Thanks. Yes, look, I want to support this motion as well. The amendment is put by Councillor Bolton. I commend the Councillor Bolton and Councillor Kavanagh for putting that up. I really want to commend all those I've met and spoken to over the life of this application and all the work that's gone into advocating around this site. It is difficult given the preferred height is not required or mandatory, and people have picked up what's been written in the report. It's about somewhat of a negotiation to this point to get it down to 5 stories, but on the balance of things, I think because of the significance of the site, the gateway aspect, and the bulk, and the fact that it's hard up against the neighbourhood residential zone, you don't need to be worried in Glenmorgan Street. There's no precedent for you. You're protected by 1 to 2 stories maximum. Your zone is set. It's not going to be any sort of precedent for you or any other people in Albion Street. So I am concerned though with the interface because it's a commercial 1 zone right up against the neighbourhood residential zone. And I think that there is some argument there, or at least we want to put the case that 5 stories with a rooftop as well is too excessive for this site and the interface. And so there's many of the reasons that have been outlined for the rest of Lygon Street, some of the developments that have gone down there. So I really want to commend the work that's gone into this for those who've appeared at VCAT for their negotiations and coming to this point. There's been some improvements with deep-rooted planting, and I want to acknowledge the residents who've protected the tree from Mrs. Rowell on her property. There's a deep-rooted tree there that's being protected and been accommodated by the developer as well. Perhaps not protected as much as we'd hope, but it's certainly going to have some protection and hopefully it will survive the development. There's otherwise, I think there's a lot of good amenity in these departments, a lot of light and other aspects. There's also good 7.5-star NATHERS rating on it as well in terms of the environmental sustainable design aspect. So there's some other good aspects of this that have happened. And 70% of the construction waste is also going to be recycled, which is not something we often see coming to us at this detail. So that's quite encouraging to see those things there. So for those reasons, I'm really supportive of the removal of the site, our recommendation to go to 4 floors with the rooftop. I just want to note that we have challenged some of these in the past. and it's not all the way that the residents have made out that when developers are putting these up. We've lost a case in Lygon and Edward Street recently, which cost us 20 to 30,000. So it is a question of what we need to, and a restaurant. It's a case of where we can argue these things. We do lose them, we do take them up, and they are expensive for us as a council and for you as residents for us to do that. But I'm prepared in this and persuaded in this case to actually support this at this point and see whether we might get a resolution, because you're still in negotiation. I hope, for the reasons that Councillor Kavanagh and Councillor Bolton put, that you'll take that into account and you'll still get a reasonable yield on this property.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Tapanos?
Thank you. I also rise to support the alternative that's been proposed. Look, it's been mentioned, but it's a gateway site. It's a very important area for us. The actual site where this development will be taking place is quite unusual. There's a street between it and Lygon Street. So in many regards, many might say that it should have been more appropriately zoned to a residential area, but it's not. Unfortunately, it's not, and we need to develop our strategic justification for what we want to see on that site. And we've done that many years ago, and what we've said is 4 stories and no more. So I do think that that restriction is appropriate. Considering it's got sensitive interfaces to neighbourhood residential, the most restrictive zone you can possibly have under Victorian planning laws, both on its east and to its south, and general residential to its north, you have to say that it needs to be sympathetic to a residential area. And that kind of height, the kind of bulk, particularly because it's predominantly on the boundaries, without significant setbacks, in my view, does give it a bulky view, particularly when you're coming down Home Street or when you're looking from Albion Street towards the Lyndhurst Hotel. I think it's quite bulky. I would encourage the architect to have a look at the design. I'm not sure whether those window designs are sympathetic to the design that's prevailing in the area. I think that might be some small changes that could also occur, but fundamentally, one less level will mean that this is a development that is a lot better and creates less traffic, less visual bulk, and it can be accepted by residents, and I think that's really important.
Thank you, Councillor Papanos. Councillor Martin?
Thanks. I rise to also support this, but I would like to just talk to this application, talk to this process, because this is a scenario that we have almost every meeting here in Moreland. We have a impassioned group of residents come to us and say, please protect the height of building X. The preferred height is this, and it's going to go 2 or 3 stories higher. This happens almost every meeting. The problem that we've got time and time again is that we're not changing the system. We're focused on the individual planning applications, and I really encourage the residents here to work with us to improve the actual planning system. There's so many things that need to be improved. The way that the state measures height, it doesn't include overruns, it doesn't include rooftop gardens. We've tried for mandatory heights and we've been refused. I think also as well, looking at even how solar's measured, it's measured at the spring equinox, it should really be the winter equinox. There's all of these things that we need to do to actually change the system to protect developments from going up that we don't want to see. And it's great that you're all here tonight, and what will happen is we'll probably go ahead with this motion. I just noted that of the applications in the last year that council has overturned the officer's decision, we've lost 100%. And so I'm just letting you know that in advance that we do have a fight on our hands if this does go to a full VCAT hearing. And also the fact that the Lyndhurst Hotel next to it is a preferred height of 5 stories down that side of the street. And so that 5 stories is preferred height. And so there will likely be applications higher than that 5 stories. So these are the challenges that we face. And us as councillors are willing to work with you all to help fix and help change the system, but you need to work with us and you need to come to us, and we need to work together, because unfortunately we don't have the power to change all things in the planning scheme. A lot of it sits at the state level, and so I just really wanted to emphasise that point to you all, and that hopefully this will go ahead, and also to the applicant as well. Please change the windows. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Any other councillors? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour of the motion? Against? Unanimous. Could that please be recorded as unanimous? Thank you. I'll now move to the officers to outline what will happen next.
Thank you. So the council has just resolved not to support the without prejudice proposal that is before the council tonight, but has authorised officers to continue to negotiate with the applicant and potentially reach a position of consent if the proposal is reduced to a height of no more than 4 stories and the amended plans are prepared that improve the architectural resolution to council officers' satisfaction. Now, if a position of consent can't be reached before the hearing, we will be proceeding to a full hearing, and council would not be supportive of the advertised proposal, and that's contested on the grounds that are outlined in the officer recommendation. So I note that the hearing is scheduled for the 25th of November, and if consent isn't reached, then VCAT will be the ultimate body who will determine that application, and objectors who have lodged statement of grounds with VCAT would also have the opportunity to present to the tribunal at the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, shall I move straight on to the next report, or is half the room... Are you staying? Otherwise, I'll give you a minute just to leave. Yeah. Thank you. I hear my start to bell now. She's going to present her report and everybody's going to be quiet. So what we'll do next is move to the next report, which is also the final report for this evening.
Thank you for listening.
DCF 77...
Really well. You spoke really well, Elsa.
I wasn't expecting that, so I didn't write anything. Whatever comes out, comes out.
Thank you.
Good job. Brilliant job.
DCF 7719, which is 19 Wilkinson Street, Brunswick. Planning permit MPS 2018-858. And I'll move to the officer to present the report.
Thank you. So this is an application at 19 Wilkinson Street in Brunswick. It's seeking the construction of a 6-storey building containing an office and dwellings. The applicant had lodged an appeal against council's failure to determine the application, and while council officers were originally not supportive of the proposal, changes were made to through a VCAT compulsory conference, and settlement of the matter is now subject to the approval of the council. So the subject site is within the Brunswick Activity Centre, an area identified for significant housing growth. The site is zoned commercially and is affected by a design and development overlay which sets a preferred building height for the area for this site, I should say, of 15 metres.
Sorry, Vita, could you just hold on for 1 second and we'll just get those people away from the door, because I think people in the gallery can't hear you. Phil's going to have to be bossy.
Shut the door.
We're not allowed to shut the door.
Why not?
We're just not allowed to shut the door. It's in the local laws. Thank you. Meeting procedure local laws.
So, as mentioned, the site has a preferred height of 15 metres. The site is located on the south side of Wilkinson Street, so that's between Sydney Road and the train line, and Brunswick Station is located at the end of Wilkinson Street. There's also a development that's been approved to the northwest of the site, which is a development which has a height of between 9 and 11 stories, to give you some context. So the original proposal considered by council was for a 6-storey building containing 260 square metres of office space and 12 dwellings. Council officers were not supportive of this original proposal on the basis that it didn't adequately respond to the relevant planning policies of the planning scheme. However, following a compulsory conference at VCAT, the applicant amended their plans to make a number of changes, which included an increase in the setback of the topmost level to a minimum of 9 metres, an increase in the office floor space from 260 square metres to 326 square metres, a reduction in the number of dwellings by 2, and other minor changes including improvement in internal amenity. So the original application attracted 3 objections during the public notice process, and they raised issues including height, traffic and amenity impacts. However, only one objector became a party to the VCAT appeal, and it's understood that they reached a separate agreement with the applicant, and as they did not participate in the compulsory conference process at VCAT. The amended proposal results in positive architectural and environmentally sustainable design outcomes. It also achieves acceptable internal amenity. The increase in office floor space also means that the proposal will positively contribute to the employment generation of the area. While the height of the building is 4.6 metres above the preferred height, it will not be at odds with the surrounding context as it continues to develop. And the mediated proposal has, with an increased setback to the top level, will provide for an acceptable outcome that achieves a sense of enclosure and openness in Wilkinson Street, which is identified as a key pedestrian street. It's therefore recommended that council consents to the agreement reached based on the conditions which are contained in the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any people who would like to speak, submitters or objectors that would like to speak to this application? No?
There's no objectors, I believe, but
yeah.
Represent on behalf.
Applicant, go for it.
Thank you, councillors. My name's Tim Clark. I'm a director at Taylor Clark and the architect for the project. Whilst the executive summary is incredibly detailed and positive from our perspective, there's a couple of items that I would like to just touch on and highlight. As mentioned, the plans before you are the combination of an ongoing negotiation and agreement with the council officers. And as also mentioned, there were some other objectors and we've been able to consider their needs and incorporate them in the latest set in front of you. We feel that that sort of reflects our consideration of off-site amenity and our neighbours quite carefully. To summarise a little bit further with some additional statistics that we feel are important, the scheme has 90% of the 10 apartments, so 9 of the 10 apartments are north-facing, and all of their open space is to the north as well. 60% of those apartments, so 6 out of the 10, have dual access to the north and the south orientation, so they are through apartments. So pretty much anywhere in Melbourne that quality of access to daylight and cross ventilation is pretty much unheard of. The targeted market is also owner-occupier, so a number of the apartments are much larger than we've typically seen over the past couple of years. And that has also meant that we've had to focus on the way people have used the spaces, usable living, dining and kitchen areas, good bedroom sizes, and outdoor areas that you can actually entertain in. The scheme also incorporates some extensive landscaping up through the facade that we've worked to rationalise, reduce and expand in other areas to manage passive surveillance onto the street, but also give a softening to the facade. The top level of the scheme does have a rooftop terrace, but that rooftop terrace is used primarily as a working garden, so we intend that the residents will be able to use that space as additional open space, but hopefully engage in more community function within the building. So the proposal has evolved over time, as touched on. The podium language has has changed in that comparison that we just saw. We've tried to strengthen the architectural language to achieve a more contextual, solid feel, and at the same time, further setbacks to the upper levels to reduce the built form impact on the space and on the street level. So we hope that you agree that, as the parties have thus far, that the scheme is of quality and is a reasonable outcome, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Can I have a motion, please? Councillor Riley?
I'd like to move the officer recommendation as has been tabled in the agenda.
And a seconder? I saw Councillor Yildiz. Sorry, Councillor Martin.
Thank you. So I just want to commend the residents and those people who've taken this issue up at VCAT and come to this point with the conferences that have occurred today. This is quite different from the one we've just seen, even though it is over the height. I think in this context, as the officers have put it, it is reasonable to expect that we can accept some variation on this building because it's going to be surrounded, it already is surrounded by other buildings of much larger height. It's not in a gateways situation. And I think the fact that there are no objectors here tonight is a sign of the goodwill and faith that's gone into developing this to get the communal space on the roof area, and the fact that it's also addressing our more integrated land strategy objectives, and that more of the space has been allocated to employment and commercial aspects, I think is a really good outcome. The apartment amenity and the environmental sustainable design aspects are also of fairly good quality. And I have to say again, this is another site that's actually saying they're going to recycle 80% of the waste from the site, which I think is a really encouraging to see given the waste problems that we're experiencing across Melbourne at the moment in recycling. So these are the kind of things that we need to be doing. Given the conference that's happening in New York right now, we need to look after our planet better. So I think there's a lot to commend for this, and thank everyone who's put some time and effort into the residents who've done that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Councillor Yildiz?
Pretty straightforward, no.
Are there any councillors that would like to speak against the motion? Okay. Anyone else like to speak in favour? I'll put it to vote. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried. Can it please be recorded as unanimous? And I'll ask the officers to outline what happens next.
Thank you. So the council has just decided to consent to the granting of a planning permit for the subject site, and so council officers will write to VCAT advising that they consent to the agreement reached, and VCAT will subsequently issue an order, and a planning permit will be able to be issued shortly thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you. So, councillors, I'll now move to urgent business, and there are no urgent business items to consider. So that concludes the business we have this evening. So, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming at home, I declare the council meeting for planning and related matters closed at 7:40.